Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Toldot. It's the 6th Torah portion in Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis. We are dealing with veritable building blocks of the people of Israel, the formation of the tribes of Israel, the forefathers, everything that they went through, dynamics of relationships between Israel and the nations. Everything is being set into motion now for the future. And this Parashat Toldot begins with the tidings of the birth of the twins that are struggling within Rivka, Yaakov, and Esau. First begins with the prayers of the couple for children, and we begin to understand the nature of these children and what each one represents. We also read about Yitzchak's experience in Gerar, blessings that went ultimately to Yaakov, the necessity of Yaakov to flee from his brother Esau, and we read about Esau and his family. The verses of Parashat Toldot, verses that open the portion, are compelling and amazing. And in order for us to really appreciate the nuances of what's going on, we should take a good look at the opening verses as follows. And Isaac prayed to Hashem opposite his wife because she was barren. And Hashem accepted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And the children struggled within her, and she said, "If this is the case, if so, why am I?" Meaning, why am I like this? And so she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two kingdoms will separate from your innards. One kingdom will become mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger." And her days to give birth were completed, and behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first one emerged ready. He was completely like a coat of hair, and they named him Esau. And afterwards, his brother emerged, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel, and he named him Jacob. Now Yitzchak, Isaac, was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. And the youths grew up, and Esau was a man who understood hunting, a man of the field, whereas Jacob was an innocent man, dwelling in tents. And Yitzchak loved Esau because his game was in his mouth, but Rivka loved Yaakov. Now Yaakov cooked a pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. Esau said to Yaakov, "Pour into me some of this red stuff, for I am faint." He was therefore named Edom. Edom is red. And Yaakov said, "Sell me as of this day your birthright." And Esau replied, "Behold, I'm going to die, so why do I need this birthright?" And Yaakov said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Yaakov. And Yaakov gave Esau bread and a pottage of lentils, and he ate and drank and arose and left, and Esau despised the birthright. You know, there are so many ideas in what we just read. Who is Yaakov? Who is Esau? Why is Esau called red? Just because he called the food red. What does he mean? Pour it into me. Why did he despise the birthright? There are so many ideas here of what they represent, and the fact that they also represent an inner struggle within each one of us, force of Yaakov and the force of Esau. But that concerns me less at the moment. You know, Yitzchak's desire to give over a blessing to one of his sons is yet another aspect of a process of clarification that our forefathers are involved in and that they took upon themselves, clarifying, setting into motion a cycle for the future generations, setting into motion spiritual development and the mission of Israel and of all humanity. And Ishmael and Esau are part of this process of clarification, and the blessings that Yitzchak wished to give over are also part of the process, because the forefathers are so busy getting things clarified within the mechanics of the human experience, you know, it's very similar to the idea around which all of this is taking place. The central theme, of course, the Holy Temple, the mountain of Hashem, and the famous teaching that each one of the forefathers viewed the Holy Temple differently, that Abraham, saw the Holy Temple as a mountain, and Yitzchak saw it as a field, and Yaakov saw it as a house. These are levels and stages we've spoken about a great deal and will again in the future, levels of a course of clarification. The development of the concept of the Holy Temple and its relationship with all humanity. So this Parsha, it's full of wonder, really. It's full of mystery. And there are two central issues that really need to be examined and understood. And one issue is the birthright. What is it? What does it represent? Why did Esau disdain it? And the other is Yitzchak's blessing, which obviously carried tremendous spiritual power. Now, regarding the birthright, the verse makes it quite clear that Esau was not interested in it. He despised it and sold it for a meal. This is because the birthright represents not so much privilege as responsibility for the betterment of humanity through the service of God in this world. Living life connected to and for divine purpose. That's Israel's legacy, and Esau disdains it. But regarding the blessings, those Esau did want. One of the greatest mysteries of Parashat Toldot is why did Yitzchak prefer Esau over Yaakov? It's a really interesting idea of how Rivka, their mother, knew the true nature of the children that were struggling in her womb that caused her to just absolutely spin into a mode of tremendous chaotic wonderment and doubt and anxiety over who these children are. And she knew that it was her responsibility to guide their future. But Yitzchak, he was just so focused on Esau being the man. We read earlier, and Isaac loved Esau because his game was in his mouth, but Rebekah loved Jacob. A conventional wisdom on these words is that Rivka came from a certain background. She had some exposure in the past to deceivers and charlatans and manipulators. That's the kind of family that she came from. Her father was a deceiver. Her brother was a deceiver. But Yitzchak had a certain purity and naivety when it came to seeing the bad in Esau. He couldn't see it. The translation that we read earlier, I consider it to be a bad translation. And the words kitzayit befiv in Hebrew were translated as his game, Esau's game, was in his mouth. But I'd like to take those English words, which literally means that he hunted with his mouth, and I'd like to turn around the English words of the bad translation and read it as he played mouth games because he was a deceiver. He feigned religious piety and fervor, making up ridiculous questions to ask his father to give him the impression that he was really just a good boy who wanted to serve God, when in reality, Esau wanted to destroy God. He wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to destroy God's presence in this world. So the character and the nature of these children is well known from the beginning and was following a certain pattern that Rivka sensed was established even before they were born. As we read, and the children struggled within her, and she said, "If this be so, why am I like this?" And she went to inquire of the Lord. And what was the answer she received? And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, two kingdoms will separate from your innards. One kingdom will be mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger." Now, everything that we read here in these enigmatic verses, it's not of no meaning. You know, we read that the day of the sale of the birthright, in exchange for some red stuff, as Esau called it, we read about Esau. He came in tired from the field. He was faint. What tired him out so? Our sages have a very specific concept, tradition, teaching about Esau's activities on that day. On that day, he raped a betrothed woman and committed murder. He also denied the existence of God and showed contempt for the birthright and desired his father's death and sought to murder his brother, causing Yaakov to depart from his father. And then, of course, Esau went to Ishmael at the end of the parsha and deepened his alliance with Ishmael by marrying one of his daughters. Esau, in short, is a murderer. It's in his blood. The hands of Esau, Yitzchak said later. His hands are the hands of Esau. But Yaakov, that Ish Tam described in our translation as an innocent man, a wholesome man, dwelled in tents. He was a scholar. He sought the word of Hashem through the Torah. Now, a scholar might also have to kill. A Torah scholar can and should be a soldier, the classic poet-warrior. But a Torah scholar cannot be a murderer. And there's one thing in particular that I'd like to explore. So we have to really open our minds and hearts to some very elusive and interesting teachings. You know, we're going to be reading in the Parsha that when the boys, they were actually older at the time, 63 years old, Yaakov and Esau, when they came in for the blessing, you know, Yitzchak was blind. And this is why Rivka decided on a route of what some might see as subterfuge. Rivka knew this is what had to happen, but Yitzchak was blind. And again, this question, why did he prefer Esau, whereas Rivka knew what this was all about? So there is a midrash that cites 3 or 4 reasons as to what caused Yitzchak's blindness. And they're all offered as alternatives. One reason that's offered is that, you know, Esau, he married some women that were actually terrible idolaters. And while living in his parents' home, he married these women that were constantly making all sorts of pagan offerings to false gods. And the smoke of these idolatrous offerings got in Yitzchak's eyes and caused him to be blind. There is another idea that the Midrash tells us, and again, all of these concepts are metaphorical, allegorical, and convey vast and deep ideas through the beautiful vehicle, the poetic vehicle of the Midrash. So in addition to this one possibility that's considered that it was the smoke of Yitzchak's daughters-in-laws, their pagan offerings that caused him to go blind. Another concept, another teaching is that at the time of the Akedah, at the time that Yitzchak was bound on the altar, when our father Abraham bound his son Yitzchak upon the altar on Mount Moriah, on the Temple Mount, the spot of the altar in the Holy Temple, that moment, while Abraham raised his hand with the knife, the ministering angels looked down, ministering angels in heaven looked down on the scene, and they saw what was going on, and they cried. And in fact, there's an allusion in a verse in the book of Isaiah, chapter 33, and verse 7 says, "Behold, their heralds cried out outside, messengers of peace wept bitterly." And while the verse refers to the messengers who brought the news that Sancherib had overrun Judah and was headed for Jerusalem, on the simple level, there's a tradition that this verse is actually, it's a homiletical interpretation. It's alluding to the angels of heaven who wept at the sight of Yitzchak being bound on the altar. And those teardrops fell into Yitzchak's eyes and caused him in old age to become blind. First of all, if this is the case that the angels' teardrops fell into Yitzchak's eyes, it's a beautiful metaphor for the pathos of the human condition. You know that the angels were crying. It's about man, how man is striving to connect himself completely to godliness and how difficult that is while his soul is in the body. And of course they're crying because of the sheer pathos of Abraham's situation, his obvious conflict and wanting with all his heart to fulfill Hashem's will, and his terrible conflict at having to bind his son to the altar. So here's the language of that midrash. We have to pay close attention, and it says, their teardrops fell, this is word for word, their teardrops fell into Yitzchak's eyes and left their impression there. This is what our sages stated. In his eyes, and when he became advanced in age, his eyes were darkened, i.e. he became blind. So I'm like wondering to myself, because I know that every word of the Midrash is so holy, why are the sages telling us that he went blind later? Is this some sort of time release? Why did it affect him later in older age? Why not immediate? Another opinion expressed in the very same teaching is that it's a little different. It's a different spin on the same scene, and it carries even more raw beauty and wonderment. And this side of the coin of the teaching says that when Yitzchak was bound on the altar, he looked up and saw the divine presence. And that's what blinded him. And this doesn't place the cause with the angel's tears, but with Yitzchak himself, because he looked up and saw something that really cannot be seen. Doesn't the Torah say, no man sees my face and lives? So another fourth option that the rabbis of the Midrash tell us, and again, this is a puzzle that we are being invited to explore. That's the beauty of the Midrash. The fourth alternative that's given is that it's very simple why Yitzchak became blind in older age, because Hashem, the rabbis say right out, Hashem did not want Yitzchak to see who was who when they came for the blessings. Can we imagine even Yitzchak's life after the binding? I mean, modern psychology would refer to this as a trauma. And how beautiful is the Torah that emphasizes that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David, these great men, they were so high, they came so close to being perfect human beings in the subjugation of their evil inclination and in their desire to serve God in this world, but they were people. And therefore we can learn something from everything in their lives, life lessons as men, even though we are not like them, because they were people that are the way people should be, and they were so close to godliness, and they were so full of holiness. But on a simple level, talk about trauma, how totally focused Yitzchak must have been the rest of his life with every fiber of his being on Hashem's presence in this world, on the reason for existence, how his consciousness must have been so uniquely undivided from God's will because he had been prepared to make that ultimate sacrifice. And not only this, but according to tradition, actually there's a lot going on between the lines, because according to tradition, even though the malach, the angel, came and informed Avraham, stay your hand and don't go through with it, it was just a test, this has been a test. Actually, according to this rather esoteric teaching, it's too late, because Yitzchak's soul left him. He was so aghast when he saw what was going on that he passed away, and the fire on the altar consumed him. But he came back to life, and in fact the sages of this tradition relate. This is the source in the Torah for the belief in the resurrection after death, because it already happened. It happened to Yitzchak. He came back to life. And in itself, again, all of this on so many levels of meaning, on the level of homily, what a powerful metaphor that is for the existence of the Jewish people. Because Yitzchak did come back to life after Abraham and Sarah not even able to have children, Yitzchak and Rivka themselves not able to have children, Yitzchak's ultimate demise on the altar and his reemergence, his encore. This is a metaphor for the existence of the Jewish people, and I digress, but it's true that while some Jews are bound on the altar and are consumed and do not come back, at least not before our eyes, like this week here in Jerusalem when 4 Jews were literally butchered, hacked to death by Palestinian terrorists in a local synagogue during morning prayers, maybe even as they read the portion of the prayers that recall the binding of Isaac. But yet miraculously the Jewish people as a whole keep on coming back to life. We get that from our forefathers. But getting back to Yitzchak, I mean, going through all of this, the binding, a death experience, it's like having the angel's tears fall into your eyes. It's like seeing the divine presence itself in this world. It's got to change you. With such clarity, with no doubts, you know, Yitzchak, what he saw, his view, his vision, his understanding, his take on the world, you know, this is something that's, speaking of him losing his sight at an older age, maybe when his sons already have come of age. Yitzchak is the hardest of everyone for us to understand. He's a man of mystery. We know he represents a certain degree of the severity of din, harshness. You know, when Rivka first laid eyes on him, when she was being brought by Eliezer, she fell off the camel. He somehow radiated something very powerful. How could he not? After everything he's been through, not just the experience of the Akedah, he actually died. We try to understand this, we try to understand the experience of the Akedah, and everything about him is just super nature. He prayed and reversed the judgment on his wife. He himself couldn't have children, but did. It's all so deep. His very name is laughter. In the future tense, thus ordained by Hashem, for his name to be Yitzchak. And Sarah said, whoever hears of all of this is going to laugh for me. Is this maybe referred to in the book of Proverbs as the laughter on the last day? Yitzchak, of all the forefathers, barely speaks. There's so little conversation recorded, so little words in his name. The Akedah and what he went through and what he saw so influenced his take on life, his take on reality, serving God. It's all the same to me, alive, dead. I saw the Shekhinah. That's blinded by the light, the teardrops that came into his eyes. I mean, what is the idea? And follow me here. What is the supreme challenge of man? According to Torah? Why are we all here? What's the backdrop? Free choice. To be able to have bechira chofshit. The purpose of existence as it is to allow a person to choose between right and wrong, between good and evil, in order to facilitate receiving reward. Let a person decide. The whole idea of free choice is that a person normally can't see the truth. You can't see the real world. You can't know, and therefore you have to choose. But if a person really knew on the deepest level from first-hand knowledge, on the level of sight, that there's only one truth, then it would be as if that person has no free choice, because the path before him is so clear, couldn't possibly choose to stray from it. And that is, on one level, the meaning of the idea expressed metaphorically, that the angel's teardrops made their mark in Yitzchak's eyes and caused his blindness, or expressed even more clearly according to the second midrashic reading, that while he was bound on the altar, he looked up and saw the divine presence. The forefathers are called the chariot of God. They're so holy, they're so close to God, but there are life lessons for us to learn as well in the realm of our lives as men. And so the most important thing of all, what did Yitzchak see in Esau? What did he see? He couldn't see. What did he see in Esau? Yitzchak was so totally focused his whole life, steady on serving God with his entire being. This was in his entire essence for his whole life. He never lost that level of commitment. And to him, because he was completely immersed in serving God with everything he had, with his whole body, with his whole life's force, as he was prepared to give up his body, his perception of serving God through the physical aspect of life was a goal. It's total immersion into everything, which it is. Total commitment, that is definitely what the Torah wants from us. And there's nothing as physical as being bound and being burned up on an altar, as opposed to Rivka, who learned at an early age how to recognize deceit because of who he was. For Yitzchak, it wasn't possible for him to consider that someone could not be seeing what he was seeing. He so believed in the loftiness of serving God through everything that he's given in this world, through every fiber of our being, with every aspect of the physical being, that when he saw when he saw Esau's raw physicality and connection to the physical, this man of the world, this man of the field, he hoped and prayed and yearned that Esau would use this dimension and his propensity to sanctify God in this world, because that's really the goal of a Torah life. This is a very important concept. We're not supposed to be separated, aloof. We're supposed to find God in this world, make his light stronger in this world. Using this world, we believe that this world can be elevated. Who better to do that than a person who is totally immersed in this world? But a Torah person doesn't murder. And the hands of Esau were bent on destruction, and Rivka knew that Yaakov's approach to bringing the light of Torah into this world and sanctifying life through Torah was the only viable approach and hope for man. And this is a fundamental Torah teaching, because Torah sanctifies this world and seeks its elevation. But Esau was fundamentally flawed and even denied God, because his desire for physicality with no borders, with no boundaries, with no limits, was an image of a different legacy. This redness of bloodshed and self-indulgence and self-promotion and self-satisfaction, physicality and bloodlust and the giving way to every base urge until God himself has to be unseated in order to be satiated. That's Esauian. I can only be satiated if there is no God. It's the very opposite of Yitzchak's life, of his revelation and all he gained by being bound on the altar. Restraint, compassion, total commitment. Yitzchak couldn't see what was going on with Esau because the smoke, the tears, the Shekhinah got in his eyes. He could not imagine that this was not clear to everyone, and seeing how Esau was totally involved in this world, he wanted to believe his intentions were to connect this world with God, because this is what a nice Jewish boy should be. But God made him blind, didn't want him to see. And the tragedy of Esau is unbridled self-indulgence and the murderous and insatiable appetite of his soul, all on their own, not wanting God in this world. But Yaakov's birthright and blessing is an assurance that humanity can strive for the best of all possible worlds by making this world, which is the only one we have, which is the only one we know, which is the only one that counts, this very physical world, making it into a place where ultimately and eventually every human being can see the light of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, and live.